Hey YouTube, I'm here this time with a first ever video. This is my 20 things I learned in my 20s. So I decided to make this video today because it is April 13th, 2020, and today I have a milestone birthday. Today is my 30th birthday. So I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, so I just wanted to bring this to you. So I have 4 categories. I've got attitude and general, I've got work, I've got relationships, and I've got money. So these are just kind of like the 12, or not 12, but the 20 things that I tend to follow a lot in my personal life. And I also chose to make this video because, it's lifestyle based. You see me talk about wax and about Bath and Body Works and sometimes about money, but I feel like in my channel, you don't really see who I am outside of those things. So I just wanted to bring this to you and maybe start a dialogue down below in the comments. So my first group, I guess, of 20 things I learned in my 20s is about attitude and life in general. So number 1, the first thing that I learned, or the first thing that I thought of, is that not everyone needs to like you. You just need to be authentic and respectful. So I think that it's unrealistic to expect everybody to like you, and I don't know like a ton of people who don't like me, but I'm sure that some people don't. Like for some people, I bet I'm just not their cup of tea. I have a very particular personality, I think, that doesn't really come through on YouTube, and some people jive with it and some people don't. And I'm okay with the fact that some people don't. And I think that everybody should be okay with the fact that not everybody else jives with who they are. It's just a personality thing. But I think that no matter what, you need to be respectful. No matter what, you need to be who you are, because if you don't like who you are and you don't know who you are, nobody else will either. So that's it. That's my number 1. My number 2, speaking of respect, is respect should be the default. Disrespect should be earned. So I see a lot of things, or a lot of memes, I guess, and stuff on social media that like respect should be earned and disrespect, blah, blah, blah. But I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think that your default should be to just respect everyone else as a human being and respect their right to have an opinion, even if you don't like it, and, respect their right to have their space and, that kind of bit. So I think actually the opposite. So respect should be your default. Disrespect should be earned. I think that having that attitude too also helps you trust other people, because if you go into a relationship of any kind thinking, oh, they need to earn my respect rather than they already have it because they're a human being, I think it just kind of creates a weird negative energy that I'm not really down for. The third thing that I learned, and I actually did not come up with this, by the way, I stole it from a video I watched a couple weeks ago, but I think about it all the time now. It is, don't put it down, put it away. So you might know, or maybe you might not know, that I'm a pretty tidy person. I don't like a lot of clutter. I don't like a lot of what I think of like junk lying around. So, if I'm in the midst of a situation where I'm like stressed at work or stressed in life or whatever, sometimes I feel like my organization kind of falters a little bit. So a few weeks ago, I was watching a video about how to stay organized, and one of the maxims in it was, don't put it down, put it away. And that kind of has helped me stay organized even through stressful situations, and even when I feel like I just have a lot of stuff. So if I'm about to put down a coat or a pair of shoes or whatever, I just tell myself, don't put it down, just go put it away. Go put it in the closet, go put it on your shoe rack, I don't know, whatever. And that really has been awesome and kind of a game changer with staying organized, which helps me feel like I have clarity not only in my physical space, but also in my mental and emotional spaces too. Number 4, if you feel like you did the right thing, then you did. All right, so I believe in this to a certain extent. I think there will always be like extreme situations where that's not really true, but I think that overall on my day-to-day, if I feel like I did the right thing, then I did. I think that a lot of people can be indecisive about whether or not they did something that was good or bad, but I feel like as long as you can live with it, and as long as you can live with yourself, and as long as you were better for someone else, then that's all there is to it. So some examples of that is, I'm a teacher, so I had a supervisor, so my principal of my school last year, and he had a saying of, were you better for kids today? And I feel like that's very powerful. I feel like, as long as I can leave work, especially every day, saying, I was better for my kids, I made good choices for my kids, then I think that's all there is to it. And I feel that way in my personal life too. As long as I feel like I'm making a good choice, then I am. And that's it. And finally, number 5 for my attitude in general is not every opinion needs to be expressed. So this is a video full of opinions, but in general, not every opinion needs to be expressed. I think that when I started to learn this and started to practice it, it helped me listen more and talk less, which I think is really beneficial in relationships, it's beneficial at work, it's beneficial at school, it's beneficial in so many situations to, again, not feel like you have to express everything just because you're thinking it. I think that if you have a valuable contribution that's relevant and meaningful and it can kind of like push a situation forward, then I think that please do express it. But especially if it's negative or whatever, just because you think it, if you don't think it will improve a situation, you don't need to say it. So those are my 5 for attitude in general. And my next 5 are about work. So, as I've been saying, I'm a teacher. I'm a high school English teacher. So I, at least before the shutdown, I spend my days with teenagers. So it's a very interesting dynamic to be in as a professional. So my number 1 thing I learned about work in my 20s is I don't have a calling, but I do have a passion. So I tend to be very pragmatic in my work. I tend to be, I don't know if I would say harsh, I feel like that's not really the right word, but I'm not foofy, I'm not Mary Poppins. I'm not that kind of teacher. So, I say that I don't have a calling, but I do have a passion. I don't feel like some higher power or whatever has called me to be a teacher. I chose to be a teacher because I'm passionate about language arts and I'm passionate about educating kids. I think that education is justice. I think that literacy is justice. That is my passion. That's why I teach. So yeah, I think that the word calling kind of suggests that you can't help but do that job. You can't help but be this way, but I can help but do it. It's just that I choose to because I love what I do. Number 2, make a solution, not an excuse. This is something that I've been telling myself this year in particular. I think this year has been a really good year for work, for kind of maturing in my job, I think. So yeah, make a solution, not an excuse. So I tell myself this because this year have been working on making emails and general communication less wordy and more efficient and more organized. So not that this happens a lot, but in general, if I'm in a situation where I am in the wrong for one reason or another and I'm having to communicate that, I have chosen and been conscious about don't make an excuse, just make a solution. So for example, there was a time a couple weeks ago where I missed a post-observation or a post-evaluation meeting with my assistant principal, and she emailed me after the fact and said, oh, we were supposed to meet at noon. And I couldn't believe I forgot. There was a reason why I forgot, but my AP, my assistant principal, did not ask for that. She just stated, oh, I missed the meeting. So instead I said, I'm so sorry, how about this time on this day? I'm open during these time slots, this, and this, all right? So I didn't make an excuse because, it doesn't change the fact that I missed that meeting. It doesn't change the fact that in some other situations I made an error. I just made a solution. I was ready to move forward in that situation. And I think that it has really helped me, again, be, more organized, more efficient, and also more mature in my job. Number 3, setting boundaries for a work-life balance does not mean you're lazy. So last year in particular, I started working more on my work-life balance. I am definitely a weekend girl. Hit me up over the weekend. Listen, I love teaching, but I love my weekends. I love them. Friday, my favorite day of the week. Love it. But I also made a point during the week to set a time for myself where, okay, at this time, the computer turns off. At this time, I leave my desk. Unless there's something that cannot wait until the next day, I'm out, all right? Because I need to be or I need to feel like I have a balance if I'm gonna be the best teacher that I can. And to me, that is not lazy. It is me recognizing what I need, not only to take care of myself, but also to take care of my classroom and take care of my kids. So I think that everybody needs to set a specific work-life balance situation that works for you, because I think it just lifts a lot of stress and helps you enjoy your job more. Number 4, if no one has told you that you're not fit for your job, you're not doing it right. So I think that this might not be true for everybody, but teaching tends to be very publicized and very politicized, where, at least in my opinion, a lot of people kind of suggest they know how to teach because they used to be in school. Like my career, my field is, I think, kind of like that. So I have been the recipient of, and when I say a couple, I mean a couple, not like a ton of people, but I have been the recipient of comments from different places like, oh, well, if you do this, then you're mean to kids and you don't belong in the classroom and you shouldn't have your job and blah, 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 blah. I feel like if you have a job like mine, or if you are also in a field, like maybe you're in politics, where people think that they know how you do your job because they know something about your job, I think if no one has ever told you that you're doing it wrong, then you're doing it wrong, right? So I think that this is very much so a situation where, if you're gonna make an omelet, you gotta break a few eggs. And sometimes I think that teaching is like that. I love what I do what I think is best for my kiddos. And, kind of like what I was talking about with attitude in general, if I feel like I did right by my kids, I did right by my administration, I did right by myself, by my classroom, that's it. And number 5, organization is half the battle. So last year in particular, I started kind of putting together more organizational systems in my classroom, and that really helped me stay on the ball and professional. So last year, I made a lot of changes because I changed states and I changed school districts. So with that change comes a change in dynamic. It brings a change in expectations. And the district where I worked in Kansas, I felt like didn't have me doing nearly as much extra stuff as my current district does. So I felt like in my current district, I needed that organizational system to stay on top of my job, and it just cleared the path for better performance, I think, at work. So organization's half the battle. I love it. All right, so next I'm moving on to relationships. Number 1, my first thing that I learned in my 20s about relationships is that love is not that scary. So I have never been so burned by a relationship that I thought that love was scary, but I feel like I hear from a lot of people, people I know and just people in general, that love is some frightening thing. You have to let go of yourself to be in love. But I don't think that's true. I think that if you just kind of let it happen and maybe don't have really specific expectations for love, then it's not that bad. And I think that even if you're just kind of thinking a little bit about jumping into something, just go for it. If the vibe is right, go for it. It's not that scary. Number 2, not everyone needs to be a spouse or a parent. So I'm a spouse now, and I am hoping perhaps to be a parent in, I don't know, a couple years. But I think that not everyone needs to be married. Not everybody needs to have kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with not choosing those life paths. I think there's something wrong with pressuring yourself or pressuring someone else into that life path, because it's so changes the dynamic of someone's life. I love my husband, but I also enjoyed being single. I found being single kind of fun, and I loved the flexibility and fluidity of it. And yeah, so I feel like, if you like being unmarried, if you like being child-free, you go for it. Live your life. Number 3, let it ride, but have a bottom line. Talking about relationships here. So when I say let it ride, it's kind of like what I was talking about with my number 1 with love is not that scary. Just let it ride. Don't feel like you need to put a label on something. Don't feel like it needs to look a certain way, but have your bottom line. So decide for yourself, what does it mean for me to be respected in my relationship? what do I definitely want to have? Like if you definitely want to get married, or if you definitely want to live in Texas, I don't know, whatever. So decide on what your bottom line is, what you won't tolerate in a relationship. But besides that, let it be what it's gonna be, you know, let it ride. So I tend to have an attitude of, you know, if the vibe is right, let it be what it is. You know, the vibe was right with my husband when we were dating, so we just kind of kept dating. Like, you know, when I first met him, if you had told me we were gonna get married, I would say absolutely not. Because to me, that was like not really my mindset. I just let it progress how it progressed, and it just became this. And it was awesome. Loved it. So I just let it ride. I didn't stress myself to put a label on anything. I didn't stress myself to have it look like anything specific. I just let it go. Like, let it be, let it be. Let it go, let it go. All right, number 4, you don't have to hate your exes. So I am a little bit unusual in the sense that I still talk to a couple of my exes. And the reason why is because, you know, we're okay. Like, we're not in a bad place. And I enjoy that person's company. And yeah, the vibe is right. So I don't have to love that person anymore. I don't have to be attracted to that person anymore, but I enjoy that I still have some of them in my life to a certain extent. So we're not besties or anything, and I can live with that. I like how, you know, I like the distance that we have, and I like the closest now that we have. But, you know, I don't understand people who feel like, oh, well, you're my ex, so I shouldn't like you. Like, yeah, it didn't work out, but that doesn't mean that person's a bad person. It doesn't mean that person doesn't deserve you or whatever. They're just not right for you, or maybe you're not right for them, or maybe both of those. So I think that having a negative relationship with all of your exes, and I don't mean neutral, I mean like straight up negative. Like, having a negative relationship with all your exes is exhausting. I don't know how people do it, but that would drive me absolutely crazy, because, you know, having that bad blood, I think, just kind of puts a damper on your life in general. So yeah, I think that there are some reasons why people would hate their exes, so I'm not saying that, but I think that in general, just need to let it go. Let that person be who they're gonna be, let them move on, and stop having them take up real estate in your mind. All right, number 5 for relationships, expressing gratitude and speaking highly of others are empowering. So I feel like I'm at my best when I am telling people why I love them, when I am speaking highly of other people, and when I'm thanking people for something they've done for me. So I just feel like maintaining those positive relationships makes me at my best. It empowers me, it makes me happiest. So I think that is still something I should practice more, but in general, something I learned during the last 10 years of my life is that. Okay, and then finally, money. I have 5 items for money, and then that's it. So number 1 for money, there's a big difference between my fantasy self and my real self. So this is something that I've been learning about since I've started practicing what I call intentional living, and since I've started getting into personal finance and learning about personal finance as an adult. So there's a lot of things that I don't buy because I recognize, oh, this is a fantasy self-purchase. This is not a real self-purchase. So your fantasy self is kind of the person that you wish that you were. It's a version of you that you think is just kind of, you know, a better version of you, but still a version that doesn't really exist on the day-to-day, especially not during the week. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, I was at DSW just kind of browsing around, and I saw a pair of pumps that I thought were absolutely gorgeous. They were fun, they were exciting, they were bold, and I loved them. I love fashion. You know, even though I dress pretty like plainly in my videos most of the time, I'm kind of a fashionista in my real life. So I just loved these shoes. I thought they were just gorgeous and glamorous and fantastic, and oh, if I wore them to work, I could wear them here too, and blah, blah, blah. But like, let's be real. On most weekdays, I'm in flats. I'm in sandals. I am not wearing a pair of pumps, especially when I'm walking around teaching for 7 hours. Like, that is not the real self. I have to know who I am, and that saves me a lot of money. So I wish I were my fantasy self. I wish I were the person who would realistically wear a pair of pumps every other day to work, but are you kidding me? That's not what I really do. And I feel like if I had purchased that pair of shoes, that would be, $50 spent on something I probably would never wear. I would look at them and I would think that they're pretty, but it would be a waste of money. Someone else could have purchased that who would probably actually wear them. So again, knowing the difference between my fantasy self and my real self and being okay with the fact that they are different has saved me a lot of money. Number 2, relearning personal finance was liberating. So I started getting into personal finance when I lived abroad in Australia. The reason why I got into it there is because I was living in a high cost of living area. I was in Melbourne and I was pretty underemployed. There was just, it's a bureaucratic situation when you're immigrating. And so, yeah, for most of my time there, I was pretty underemployed and making less than I made in Kansas. So, I was being supported primarily by my husband, and it was fine for us for the time being, but I just found a situation where we couldn't have done that forever. It just would not be realistic. So I just decided to start exploring personal finance and exploring how to be better with my money, and that's kind of how it came to be. That's how I wound up here. So yeah, it was just so liberating, learning how to be budget conscious and learning how to actually put together a budget and learning about the real self and the fantasy self. And now I do not stress about money. I have great goals that I think are attainable, and I'm so excited because I feel so good financially, emotionally, mentally. It is amazing. It's liberating. I love it. So relearning personal finance was one of the best things I did in the last 10 years. Number 3, if you don't value something, don't pay for it. So I like to think about number 3 a lot because I am, again, in a high cost of living area. I live in the DC metro, and utility, I think water is kind of expensive in Virginia, but my electric is pretty cheap, and I don't think that most things here are too much more expensive than elsewhere in the country, but really rent is your monster. Rent is extremely expensive. So I have never said this in a video yet, but I've got some news. I am moving to Colorado this summer. So I'm moving to Denver, which is another high cost of living area, but not like the DC metro. And so part of that was that my husband has a work situation that might take him to Denver, and with airline pilots, we can live anywhere we want. So it's kind of like wherever I find a job is where we go. So yeah, we have situations that are kind of taking us to Denver, but also we kind of decided that the DC metro is nice, but neither one of us has an emotional connection here. So, we're paying a premium to live somewhere where we don't really value the area. And for that reason and some other reasons, we're gonna skedaddle and go somewhere where our hearts are really taking us. So we're here for his job, and then I just found a job here too. But like I said, we have been talking about how it's a lovely area, but our heart is not here. So we don't want to pay a premium to live somewhere where we don't feel a connection to. So we don't really value living in the DC metro as much as it is expensive. So for that reason, we don't value it, at least not really, so we're not gonna pay for it after a few more months. Next, there are a few things you have to have. This kind of goes in with my number 3, but I think that people kind of justify and make choices and say, oh, well, I have to buy this thing. Oh, well, I have to do that thing. Not really. Some things you do have to have. You have to have groceries or food, I guess. You have to have some clothes. You have to have health insurance, whatever. But there are very few things in life that you have to have. So I think that, knowing that helps you take control, I think, of your finances, and helps you take control of deciding what you value and deciding what your dreams are going to be. And then finally, my number 5, this one kind of made me laugh when I wrote it down, but I think it's a really important thing to know, especially for like millennials and that kind of crowd, is number 5, coffee is not why you're broke. All right, so I think that in the personal finance world, a lot of people say, oh, well, if you just stopped going to Starbucks every single day, then you would, you know, be able to afford this $500,000 house. Like, no, that's not true. So I don't drink coffee. Tea is my equivalent to coffee. So tea is what I drink in the mornings to kind of like wake me up. And I don't get it every single day. I do get it most days though. But you know, a tea or a coffee or whatever, that couple dollars a day is not why you feel like you have no money. You know, if you budget for that, there's nothing wrong with having a daily Starbucks. There's nothing wrong with having a daily Sonic tea or Panera tea, which is what I tend to get. You know, as long as you budget for it and you value it, there's nothing wrong with paying for it. But I think that people tend to be broke, and I mean broke and not poor, by the way. Those are two different things in the personal finance world. But people tend to be broke not because they're buying the coffee, but because they're not creating a budget that includes that coffee. So I think that, you know, making sure that you really are on top of your finances, and that includes knowing whether or not you're going to want that coffee, will help you become unbroke, essentially, and again, help you achieve what you really want in the future, in the next 20 years or whatever. Okay, so that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Kind of a chatty video, but I'm really glad that I made this, and I hope you guys find it valuable. As always, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at YellowBrickExpat, same way it's spelled here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.